All right, let me preface this a little bit by saying that there's this thing called box letters, and box letters are kind of like bubble letters. And if when you were young you had a teacher that taught you about bubble letters, box letters are very, very similar to bubble letters in a lot of ways, except that they fit into boxes. And so in order to make box letters, you have to kind of make a series of boxes. So a big box is where the letter is going to fit, and then a skinny box like this is the space between letters. And I'm not going to measure these out perfectly, so pardon me if they're not perfect. And then you would make a box, a big box, for every letter in a word that you would, think that you needed. So of course this would be like a 5-letter word, right? I'm not going to make it a word at all. I'm just going to make this the ABCs. But this would be that type of a plan. And oh, I made a double box over here, but I don't really need to, even though that is technically the end. I guess there should be another double box over there. So over here, when we're thinking about making bubble letters, and I make a bubble letter A, I'm kind of like taking this shape and I'm just kind of keeping these round edges, and I'm thinking about, how the larger shapes of an A look, right? A, bubble letter A, right? Over here in a box letter, I'm trying to use the box itself as much as possible in order to make the letter. So I know that if I'm looking at an A, right, a capital letter A, that it comes to a point right here, and it has these two little legs, right? So up here, I need to really plan out, this is going to be where that point kind of hits the box, and then over here, there's going to be a box, or the leg that hits the box, and then there's going to be another leg that hits the box, right? And then I know that these are angular, so I'm actually just going to draw an angled line from the edge up to the top bit, and then I'm going to also draw another angled line from this edge down, and then from this edge up, and then a little plane, right, or a little flat spot, and then back down, and then we have this triangular center piece of the A, right? And now I've made a box letter A. Now that we have this box letter A in here, right, we have our A, we have our box letter A, we have our bubble letter A. You can then think about a B, right? So a capital letter, I'll stick with B here. And the same idea, when I'm thinking about a B, we know that the B will touch this entire back section of this box because it has this thing, the B line, right? But then it has these two bumps as well, and I need to plan out those bumps. So I know here, there's definitely going to be a curve, right? Because it's this curve that's here. And then there's also a curve here at the bottom, right? I can curve this in as well. And then in the middle, it has this, kind of triangular curve that happens. And so I'm going to plan out that curve as well, right? So I have almost what seems like a McDonald's M or something kind of going down this end, but I'm really kind of thinking about, each space. Then I want to think about these center areas of the B, much like I would if I was making a bubble letter B, except that this time I'm trying to plan it around this box, right? And now I have a box letter B. So now I have a box letter A, I have a box letter B, and we can say the same thing, box letter C, right? And then here I want to kind of plan out the same concept. This will be where the C kind of comes to an end, so I'm bringing this in quite a bit around here. And then the center of the C, there's going to be kind of an oval type shape, right? And then around here, I'm going to have these edges cut out. So then I have a box letter C, right? A, B, C, D is going to be the next one here. And then as we're thinking about the letter D, it's kind of like B, where it has this line that's going to come down. So then it has a curve that's here and a curve that's there. So, but it doesn't have that little, triangular curve in the center there. So instead, we're going to try to stay consistent, and we're going to make kind of pretty much like a regular letter D in the middle of the box letter D. And then we have box letter A, B, C, D, and then box letter E, right? And box letter E works the same way. We know that letter E will come all the way across here, and it'll actually come all the way across here, and it will come all the way across here. So all we really need to worry about then is kind of the space that's in here a bit. So as I go this way, I can kind of freehand this in a little bit if I like to, and then there's my big box letter E. So box letters definitely different than bubble letters because they use this box system. It keeps the letters very consistent in size in a lot of way. Not that it gets rid of all the wonk to the letters, but it's super important to kind of understand how box letters work in order to do this next step. Bubble letter B. All right, so I'm going to stop here and then we'll pick up. All right, so we are going to talk about how to make 2-point perspective letters. And 2-point perspective letters are very much similar to the box letters that we just got done looking at. In this case, it's 2-point perspective, so we're going to need a horizon line, right? And we're going to need 2 vanishing points, one on either side of the page. Now, we also want to think about the center of this as having a line because that line will become kind of the corner, like the corner of the house in the other demonstration. So now I have this line that kind of shows or plays the role of the corner, right? And then what I'm going to do is give some converging lines going down to these points. 1, 2, right here. 3 over here. And what they're doing is converging from this corner mark out to the horizon line right on the vanishing points, right? Because the vanishing points are the point at which everything disappears over the horizon. So now we have kind of this shape that looks very much like a kite, right? Kind of reminds me of a kite. And this shape will play out how these letters work for us. So I'm going to just do 2 letters for this to keep it as easy as possible. And I'm going to then, just like with the box letters, I'm going to plan out how big my letters are going to be. So this is going to be 1 letter here, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to plan out how big my letters are going to be. And if I really wanted to, I could take a measurement from here, 2 1/4 inches. I could go over here. I can make another one that's exactly 2 1/4 inches. Is it super duper important that you do that? No, it's not. But that's something that we could, think about as we're making some of this here. All right, so now I have 2 areas in here with 2 different boxes drawn out. And those boxes are much like the boxes from the box lettering, right? So here's the one box, here's the other box, and here's the corner and our converging lines and our horizon line, right? So there's a lot of lines going on. Now we need to pick out what letters we're going to do, and for this demonstration I'm going to use the letters P and U. And the reason why I'm going to use P and U is I think they're funny, and also I think it's important to understand how to work with some curves when dealing with a space like this, right? So first of all, we know that in perspective, things that are farther away are smaller and closer together, and things that are closer to us are larger and farther apart. So we also know that when doing box letters, we need to kind of think out which edges of a letter are going to hit. So if we real quick just make a box letter down here, we'll say this is our box for our box letter, and then we're starting to think out a P in a box. We know that the P is going to hit both of these edges, right? And then we know that there's a curve in the top here, and we also know that that curve continues around over here, right? And then we know this line goes down, and then we have to think about kind of this little D kind of mark that's going to happen to make the whole of the P, right? And so we have our box letter P. We can also think over here real quickly about our box letter U, right? So for a fact, we know that U is going to touch mostly along here and along here, and then we're going to have a curve where it touches, and we're going to have a curve where it touches, and then we're going to touch here, and then we're going to have kind of this half an oval that's going to make up the center section of the U, right? So we still have kind of, you know, these bits in here that are just the original box. They're not really the letter itself. But the letter is very clearly there. All right, so in this box, we're going to create our P, but we're going to do it in perspective. So we want to know that the P is definitely going to run this entire line here, and it's actually going to run a decent chunk of this line moving up, right? And then we know that there's a curve that happens in the P, and it's going to hit this front line. And then this kind of signifies the center. So if we start to think about, you know, how a P is shaped, you know, that line is going to hit somewhere around the center in here. If we want our P to have, you know, a little shorter section in here, that's fine. If we want this to really match up to the center, that's also fine too. For this case, I'm going to have this really match up to the center. So we're going to make a curve that comes along in like this for our P. Then we need to think about how wide this is going to be. And we have to also remember that in order for this to really work, things in space that are farther away are smaller or skinnier here, right? So we don't want to make this big and wide because it's not really going to work very well in space, but we're going to make it a nice chunk. But we have to remember that then as we get up here, that this part in here is actually going to be wider than this part in here. So this is our P, and we can use this line right here to take this back into space, right? And then we just need to worry about kind of that center hole of the P up here, and that D kind of shape to it. All right, guys, what we really want to remember is once we put in a vertical line like this into the work, we have to make sure that we're going back or you know, thinking about how other lines work from the point, right? So if we go over here and we come from our singular point, we can kind of make a line that's coming out like this, and then we can look down here at the bottom, and then we can go from this bottom point and make a line that's coming out like this. And that's really the directions to keep this all in perspective that needs to go. Now, right around this area, of course, we want to start to think about bringing that curve in so that we're staying consistent with the curve both on the outside and on the inside. And what we've done here is to create a P that fits within inside of this perspective box, much like the box that we had down here, right? So if I'm looking at this letter now, it's actually in perspective, but the problem is it's only really in perspective for one line. Oh, give me 1 second and I'll show you what I mean. So this P is only actually in perspective for one point at this point in time. And if you kind of just take another piece of paper and cover some of this up, and we take it in a direction like this, you'll notice that this is actually just a 1 point perspective at this point in time, right? So if I was to actually put a horizon line, a line along through this point, this would be as if this P was just kind of written on a road that was going off into the distance. So it's not actually thinking about the second point just yet. So what we need to do is then to consider, of course, the other point in the 2 point perspective. Since we've only kind of thought about 1 point at this point in time, what we need to do is to think about the other point. And to do that, we're going to need to use our ruler. And what we're going to do is kind of anchor this ruler over here with our finger a bit so that we can pivot it back and forth like this. And what we're going to do is to pivot it until we hit an angle. And the first spot we're going to hit here is on this part of the P, right? And then as we go up a little bit more, up we hit another angle back in here. But since that will cause us to overlap here, the P, we're actually not going to draw that angle in. So we're going to move up like this. Oh, we hit another angle here. But this angle is actually already drawn in because it's the horizon line, right? And then as we go up, 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 we hit another angle here. This one we're not going to draw in because it's an overlap. If we keep on pivoting up like this, same thing here. We're not going to draw in this angle because it's an overlap. Going up here, we hit this corner angle. Oh, we're going to actually draw this one in because it does not overlap our P at all. So we're going to make a nice line in there. And then as we go up a little bit farther, this one overlaps. We're not going to draw that one in. This one overlaps. We're not going to draw that one in. And as we go all the way up to the top, this one does not overlap. And we're going to actually draw this one in as well. So here we have another line. Now, these lines I only brought to the center, but you could bring them all the way across over here if that helps you. The problem is that later on you'll have to end up erasing them. So the next thing we need to do is to start to mirror some planes, right? So we have this plane that we made in here, and now we want to make a mirrored plane down a little bit farther to give this some thickness, right? So here we will take, I'm gonna make this pretty fat. I'm gonna bring this over here, and then this one over here, I have to mirror this curve on this plane. So we're going to bring it over here, and then we're going to mirror this curve around on this plane. And then as we go back in space over here, we want to put in a line. Now this line should technically be done with a ruler. So over here with a ruler, right? And then from here down, and I want that to kind of make up that width that's in there. So now we've drawn our 3D, right? P, letter P, that has now been made so it is in perspective for 2 points. All right, so at this point in time too, we could really start thinking about, how to add something to kind of stress the idea that this is a plane on here to this image. And one of the ways we can do that is with some color. And then we have kind of this P that's got a bit of space to it, right? Now, as we're looking at that, we should start to think about what's over here on the other side, which is going to end up being the U, right? So when we're over here, we can go back and really think out how we were working with this. Well, where did it touch here? Where did it touch here? And touch here, and over here, a little bit in the bottom there. We can think about the same thing here. If we make the U come in here, and then it's going to be bigger because this is closer up, and it's going to be smaller because this is farther away, right? And then we have to think about where's the center between the edge here and the edge over there, not where's the center between this mark and that one, right? And so that's going to be in here somewhere. We know the U is going to come down like this, and it's going to curve, and then we know it's going to come down like this, and it's going to curve again, right? So we've set up kind of the large part of this already, and then we're coming down like here, we're coming down over here, and these two are connecting in that kind of, semicircle idea, half a circle, half an oval idea. Okay, now, once I have this kind of roughed in like this, you can see how it looks like, our other U, but at an angle a bit. And now we've drawn a U that is a 1-point perspective U to this dot over here. Over here, on the other hand, I need to now think about this point, right, our second point, and we're going to do it just the same way as we did before, which is to pivot, right? So we're going to pivot from here. And I'm just bringing this to this center line. And then we're going to keep on pivoting it up, pivot up, pivot up. Pivot up, pivot up, pivot up. Pivot up, 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 up. And that's really all the lines I'm going to get for this U. And then I need to think about how to bring this U back around. So here we're going to start to mirror this shape again, right? Mirroring planes a little. And then back in here we can mirror it again. And then we have our three-dimensional U that is in 2-point perspective. So there's our PU. So if we think to ourselves that it's actually sitting on top of ground, and then we start to think about, okay, well, you know, this U would get a shadow that comes from over here and goes out, right? But not only that, we need to think about how it curves out from here in the opposite direction of it. We could place a shadow in here on the ground that would be getting cast, right? A cast shadow from the U itself. Oh, I need to check this line. Check this line here. Check this line here. Make sure I'm staying in proportion, or perspective, and proportion really. And then also the same thing from this P, right? I could say this P could also be casting a shadow. So if we look over here, cast a shadow out just like this from the same thing. All right, now other things you could do as well is think about, you know, maybe there's little people that are sitting out here on top of them, or, you know, in the middle of these spaces. So, you know, you could have a little guy laying in here, a guy up here waving, a guy climbing, those types of things. So hopefully this is a good introduction of how to work with letters in a 2-point perspective. And I want to show you guys one last idea before I run off. Okay, before I'm totally gone here, or this is gone, I just want to show you some work from students in the past. This piece by Tim Wright that includes a lot of different sports inside of the word Nike. This piece by Eric Smith that shows trees inside of the word tree, right? This piece, I can't remember who did this piece, I'll tell you the truth, but it says Puerto Rico, and it doesn't seem to have a name on it anywhere, so it was really well done. An excellent Puerto Rican flag, and then all these little ideas of San Juan and Rio, so each letter kind of shows a bit of different spot of Puerto Rico. And then this final piece here too, fine art, right? And it kind of gives you an idea of working with some of those shadows like we were doing in the other piece, and a word that was done very, very blocky. All right, guys, that's it. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.